So, have you ever typed a message on WhatsApp and even before you finish it, have you ever typed a message on WhatsApp and even before you finish typing, your phone suggests the next word? Or probably asked Alexa or Google Assistant to play your favorite Bollywood song. So, how do they understand what you want? Well, the answer is pretty much simple and something called as the language models. So today we are going to exactly see what these language models are and why these modern models are so large, smart, and powerful. So let's look into these model in general. Now, when we talk about the what is language model, and this is going to be our basis of the first discussion, what is a language model? Well, language model is nothing. It's just a very smart guesser. So what it does is it looks for few words and then tries to predict the next word. For example, if I say, let's say Virat Kohli scored a brilliant what? Now, most of us will immediately guess that this is going to be either a century, right? Or probably 100. And I'm guessing most of you must be guessing out of these two words. So that's exactly what the language model also does. It tries to guess what word fits the next best word. So language models don't actually understand like what we humans do. They just learn from patterns. And the patterns they have seen in millions of sentences during the training period. And that's exactly how they are basically understanding what next word is going to be. So let's say you are already using language model in a day to day, and the fact is that you're using it on a day to day basis and even without realizing it, because when you are using your mobile keyboard. So what it does is it's basically going to suggest you the next word or corrects your spelling, and that's exactly where the language models are used. The another pretty much example would be the Google, where you are basically going to type something and it auto completes your query. Or nowadays we are heavily using something called as the Chat GPT, where it gives you the answers like in a real person would talk to you and give you the answer. Forget about that. Even when you go to, book a cab on, Ola or Uber, right? Or probably even order food on Zomato, right? Zomato or, Ola. So when you go to their chatbot and you quickly raise your ticker and stuff like that, they quickly understand your query and they revert you back with the right amount of answer. So all of this magic is happening because of the language model which is basically working at the behind. So what does language model work you know on? Or probably we say like how does these how are we basically going to explain this language modeling in, you know in general. So how does language model usually work? That's going to be our basic fundamental understanding. So let me make it very simple. So what language model does is it breaks your text. So you wrote a text and it basically breaks down the text into smaller, you know, pieces, and we call these pieces as tokens. So these pieces are not really exactly words. It can even be a smaller pieces or probably combination of words. So for example, XD can be a token, right? So these are broken down into smaller tokens. Now we understand and we know that computers don't really understand the words, but they understand numbers. So what computer does is they will basically break down these tokens now to numbers. And after breaking down into numbers, what it does is it tries to analyze the pattern, like which word will usually come together. So, for example, when I say a specific word, like for example, how. So, how comes with what sort of the word together? Does it how does how does is one parameter? How are is going to be another fact, you know, and so on and so forth. So it basically tries to understand what are the words which usually come together and what are the kind of sentences which also makes sense in that particular context. And based upon, its learning, it tries to predict the most likely the next word. And that's exactly how the, language model basically works. So the model doesn't have feelings or it truly understands the entire meaning of the sentences speaking, giving you the answer. It just calculates based upon the probability and the patterns. Question comes across, why do we call it as a, you know, large language model then? This is going to be the understanding. So, I mean, the whole point is why do we need large language model in the first place? And the answer to this question comes across with the problems with the old model. The problem with the old models were that they could only remember 2 to 3 words at a time. That was the, a maximum one. And that's why you see the older model which were suggested on your mobile phones, they were only be able to suggest you for 1 or 2 model altogether. The other problem was, you know they would make some silly mistakes because they probably missed some you know full meaning altogether. So missed full meaning. And these two problems were enough in understanding for the scientists to basically come across with something which solve this problem and make the model much more smarter and powerful at the same time. So suppose if I say I um, you know went to bank to fish. Now does it make sense? Why would I go to bank to make to fish, right? So obviously here the bank would basically means a river bank, right? It can mean a river bank and probably not a ATM or money bank I'm talking about, right? But the small model at this point would basically get confused, right? And so does we got a confusion in the first place as well. But a large model basically understand the context, right? So it understand that if a person is talking about hey fish, right? So obviously bank at this point would try to relate with something with river and not something with you know ATM or something around it, right? So that is how basically you know it's basically going to make some sort of the correlation altogether between the words. So when it goes across and it builds upon these model, the next question which comes across is why these models are so special. What makes these models very, very special, altogether? And there are a couple of reasons for it. So first one is they have more brain power. Well, we call it more parameters they have. The second point is they have seen more data. Now, these data are data from the books, Wikipedia, websites, and even the conversations. They also understand different languages altogether. So, for example, English, Hindi, Tamil, Bengali, you name it. They probably understand those languages. The fourth one is they can perform more complex tasks. So, for example, tasks like summarizing a book, solving a math problem, or probably even writing a poem. And all of these together makes the large language model very, very special. Now, let's try to have a simple analogy about, small model because, that's where the discussion, we started with small model versus the large model. Well, just imagine that a small model, and I'm talking about the small language model, is like a school kid who just knows only a few nursery rhymes. So, a school kid knows few nursery rhymes. On the other hand, this large language model is like a university professor who has, read thousands and thousands of books, right? Seen a lot of movies, right? And probably can talk about any topic you want, right? Be it cricket, Bollywood, business, science, anything that you talk about, it basically talks about. And that's basically the difference between a small model and a large model. Small model is trained on a small amount of data sets, so it basically is like a kid, and where large model is set on the huge amount of data set, so it knows a larger context altogether. So let's do a quick recap of whatever we have gone through so far. What we have gone through is we started our discussion with understanding what is language model. So language model, the whole idea of language model is to basically predict what word comes next in a sentence. So it's all about predictions. These patterns, these predictions are totally based upon the huge amount of data on which it was trained on. The large language model are powerful because it's powerful because it can understand the deeper context, right? More languages and perform the complex task as well. We already have seen that these are all part of our lives, be it the mobile phone, our chip chat GPT that we usually do today's world, some smart apps, or even the voice assistant like Alexa or Google Assistant. All of these is involving the large language model for it. So language models like ChatGPT, Gemini, and others are truly shaping the technology, and we are probably at a center where we are witnessing this huge AI revolution, and we are probably the first-hand experience, getting a first-hand experience about this AI revolution in general. So let's look into the entire journey of the revolution, and we'll look into the overall introduction and overall idea about this AI in general. So next video we'll talk about a bit of the history of the language model. How did it start from models like what to vec, and how did it transform to truly the transformers, and LLMs. So let's look into this in the next video.